You're watching a 7 on Your Side Investigates special report.
Guys, keep walking, please.
Overcrowding in New York schools.
He couldn't be put in honors classes because there was no room for him.
Hallways and closets turned into classrooms.
It's just widening the gap, the achievement gap.
We take parents' concerns to the state.
Governor, quick question.
Public housing nightmares.
We're people too.
Pitch black.
No exterior lighting.
Where is Niger?
Crumbling infrastructure.
3 elevators and they don't work.
How are we supposed to live like this?
And city government mistakes costing New Yorkers big.
We lost everything.
Measles returns.
Once you have children, you realize how terrifying everything is.
Parts of New York facing a serious threat.
It just doesn't take a lot of people not vaccinating, and then the whole community is at risk.
And taking drastic measures.
Will issue violations and fines to people who remain unvaccinated.
I just don't see how that's possible in America.
Need we wait for someone to die?
A transportation emergency, a spike in people dying on the road.
When a bicyclist is killed, we really have to make sure we show some sensitivity here.
He was following all the rules of the road.
Something about an A-frame, he must have not seen her.
We're like any other family, but we carry deep scars.
We're fighting for you.
You were supposed to be taking care of the car. She's wheelchair bound, so she can't actually get in and out of the building. But you understand that that's discriminatory. Yeah. It's actually against the law.
Yeah.
The city has a problem, and the one place that it can be solved is right here at the city.
Absolutely.
And it's not getting solved.
No, but it's going to be.
I'm Danielle Lee, and here at Eyewitness News, our investigative team has spent the year taking on the issues you've told us are important to you. And as 2019 comes to a close, we're diving back into those issues to see where we started, where we've come, and what's left to do in 2020. We'll be examining the areas where policies have changed, where conditions have improved, and where officials have increased transparency because of our reporting. And we're going to start with education.
Guys, keep walking, please. Keep walking.
We have certain spaces that are not even conducive for learning.
Children were being taught on stages and in closets and hallways.
Yes, let's do this one again, okay?
He couldn't be put in honors classes because there was no room for him.
It's just widening the gap, the achievement gap.
Overcrowding,
Ketchup, syrup.
underfunding, and rising poverty rates. They call themselves the Suburban 5.
It's really unfair.
5 school districts, largely working and middle class, neighboring some of New York's wealthiest towns, magnifying the differences between the haves and have-nots.
It starts to, wear on the children.
Repeatedly, over more than a decade, the Ossining, Portchester, Glen Cove, Riverhead, and Westbury school districts have been shortchanged by the state, receiving just a fraction of the money they were promised under state law. Altogether, New York owes them more than $108 million. Meanwhile, those wealthier neighbors are getting more than their share, not less.
Hi, Lou.
It's the opposite of what Jessica Vecchiarelli has taught her daughter about fairness.
How was your school day? Yeah.
She's a mom in Ossining, who's teamed up with other parents in the Suburban 5.
I remember this from high school.
People like Portchester mom Carolee Brakewood and Westbury dad Rinzalaya.
Be good.
They've written letters, even traveled to Albany, begging the state for money.
It's exhausting.
The trouble is how the state funds education. It uses a formula intended to send more money to the neediest districts. But the state has only loosely followed that formula in an effort to save money. And because the Suburban 5 are financially struggling school districts with rising minority enrollment and otherwise wealthy counties, superintendents end up with much less than they need.
The school district is growing. The funding isn't.
I think this is a tipping point for us right now.
Ossining Superintendent Raymond Sanchez has cut teachers.
Good.
Put kids in converted custodial closets, tiny makeshift classrooms with temporary walls, and in the cafeteria, with just a curtain to reduce the noise. Superintendent Eldez Budai has taken similar measures in Westbury, putting classes in breezeways and basements with ladders for fire escapes.
There's a certain level where creativity is not going to work for us.
So dígame, ¿qué es un crédito?
And in Riverhead,
¿Pueden coger más?
Superintendent Ariela Henriquez has just one bilingual counselor for the entire district.
We have not kept up.
So here's the problem. Riverhead has one of the highest rates of migrant students in New York. The number of kids who don't have a good grasp on English has more than doubled in 5 years, outpacing the state and county averages. And so while you might think the school district would get a significant bump in funding from the state, it hasn't. Instead, the state has shortchanged this district by nearly $25 million. And you have to wonder, how does that happen?
Well, I don't know exactly how all of it happened in the past.
Shelley Mayer leads the Senate Education Committee.
There have been winners and losers, as you point out, and that's not right, and we can't let politics drive where the money goes.
Mayer is behind a Senate proposal to begin correcting this problem, increasing education funding the state calls foundation aid by about $1.2 billion, with plans to add even more money over 3 years. The Assembly has a similar proposal, but Governor Andrew Cuomo has a much different vision. He's proposed increasing foundation aid by about 72% less than the legislature.
People here in Westchester County are attending classrooms in hallways. What do you think the answer is to this education problem?
We're going to do more, and we're going to do more this year. But we spend a lot. We also have to respect the taxpayer.
What do we want? Funding!
Dozens of taxpayers who are also parents protested in Albany. They disagree with the governor and argue his plan isn't respecting anyone. Quite the opposite, it's disrespecting their kids' future.
There's just not much we can do with that.
My children already have lost. We're scared, and we want what's right.
A state spokesperson said our reporting of this issue of education funding helped make it one of the topics legislators received the most calls about during the past legislative session. And under pressure, lawmakers increased funding for the school districts we profiled by 5 to 14%. Lawmakers also committed to revamping the formula that they use to fund school districts, possibly as early as this coming school year. And talks about how to do that are already underway in the state education committees. In addition to looking at money issues, we've also taken on issues of misconduct and also safety on school campuses, including reports of sexual assault on college campuses. The hashtag #SurvivingSJU was started by a Queens campus senior. It all started after a conversation he'd had about sexual assault with his friends in response to that Lifetime series. But he never imagined the attention that one tweet would get.
And that's how it took off. I just got to a point where I'm tired of seeing my friends hurting and having to see their abusers on a daily.
The hashtag started trending on Twitter. At least 2,000 tweets, 1,786 retweets. Past and present students were sharing their thoughts and allegations of abuse.
It shocked me, it scared me actually. Like I was taken aback, I wasn't ready to see that, you know? To this very minute, people are still coming forward with stories. It's just crazy at this point. I can't even put it into words, you know?
The university's 2018 crime report identifies 4 instances of rape in 2017 on the Queens campus. 1 instance of domestic violence, 3 cases of dating violence, and 2 instances of stalking. But students worry the real numbers, possibly unreported, are much higher.
There needs to be action now. There needs to be a change. There needs to be a shift.
The university tells us they are reaching out directly to anyone who's posted with a complaint using that hashtag. And they say they investigate all allegations thoroughly. Over multiple months following that story, we talked to students at various private universities, and we found a lack of reporting of sexual assaults.
According to the Department of Justice, college women do not report being raped more than 95% of the time. That is largely because of fears about being treated with hostility by authorities and not wanting people to know. A spokesperson for SJU declined our request for specific information about how many sexual assault investigations that hashtag #SurvivingSJU generated. He blamed privacy concerns and offered this statement. Conversations around combating the issue of sexual misconduct are taking place at colleges and universities across the country.
2019 marked the most significant measles outbreak this country has seen in decades. Parts of New York declared states of emergency because of the outbreak. And so we asked the question, how do more than 1,000 people nationwide catch a disease that had previously been declared eliminated in the U.S.?
critically important that we address this crisis now.
April 2019.
Will issue violations and fines to people who remain unvaccinated.
Had public health officials scrambling to address a growing health emergency as the number of measles cases around the country skyrocketed from 1 to 100 and ultimately more than 1,200 cases, mostly in New York.
Need we wait for someone to die?
The outbreak put parents at odds. Those who believe in vaccinations.
If you're not doing this, which has been proven, what else are you gonna do?
And those who don't.
My children had the chickenpox and the measles, and they are perfectly fine. So I believe God did a good enough job. We don't need anybody to interfere.
In New York City, 95% of the sick were not completely vaccinated, and most of them under 18 years old, which is why we mapped the vaccination rates at tens of thousands of schools around the country to determine what schools had dipped below a 95% vaccination rate, the rate doctors recommend is necessary to prevent an outbreak.
So that's almost everybody. It just doesn't take a lot of people not vaccinating their children for that rate to fall below 95%, and then the whole community is at risk.
We found the risk increasing as the number of students with exemptions from vaccines nearly doubled. 1 out of every 3 New Jersey schools reported vaccination rates below 95%, and Connecticut and New York just over 1 in 10. But in the areas mostly impacted by the outbreak, the rate was much higher. In Rockland County, nearly 2 out of 5 schools, and in Brooklyn, nearly 1 out of 4, making it no wonder the measles found a footing in the U.S.
Ready, set, go!
And forcing parents of young children to rethink a disease they'd assumed was a worry of the past.
Once you have children, you realize how terrifying everything is, and how, as much as you want to protect them from everything, you are so limited.
As part of our reporting, we built an interactive vaccine tracker in collaboration with ABC-owned television stations around the country. You can head over to our website to use that tracker and also to see the vaccination rates in your school or your county. But our reporting didn't end there.
Let's fight like hell.
We covered the outrage from parents as New York became the 5th state to eliminate religious exemptions from vaccines.
We're going to be branded with a scarlet letter or the Star of David and be told, you can't come in this building.
We talked to lawmakers about the lack of transparency at certain schools about the number of students who are immunized. And we asked lawmakers why immunization laws only apply to students in schools, but say nothing about adult employees and volunteers.
We really have no idea where that adult population stands as far as their vaccination status, and they're no less likely to carry an infectious disease.
Certainly, it's something we should look at. The notion that you want to keep kids safe is our North Star during this discussion.
And at many of your requests, we looked at the track record of a government settlement program designed for people who believe they were injured by vaccines. Have you ever heard of the National Vaccine Compensation Program? It's a federal program that dates back to the 1980s. Congress created it in response to the number of lawsuits that makers of vaccines were facing. They didn't want manufacturers to let fears about financial losses keep them from making more vaccines. So they created this program. It's basically a no-fault alternative to a lawsuit. If someone thinks that their child was injured or even killed by a vaccine, they can file a claim. The federal government will then evaluate the situation and decide if that person was really harmed or not, and whether or not they deserve to be compensated. About 70% of the time, the federal government just settles, often without even determining whether or not that vaccine caused the injury or not. Some people say that the existence of this fund is proof that vaccines are unsafe, but doctors say that's not true.
Serious side effects are very, very, very rare. Much more likely than a serious side effect from the vaccine is that an unvaccinated person will get measles and develop a serious complication from measles, ending up in the hospital. It has been proven that the vaccine is safe.
Here's what we found. We took a look at vaccine records from 2006 to 2017. About 1 out of every 800,000 people who got vaccinated filed a claim through this fund. And of those, about 2 out of 3 received compensation. For the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine specifically, it's pretty similar. Just under 1 out of every 800,000 people filed a claim,
and roughly half of those were compensated. Now, money for these compensations is made possible through a tax on vaccinations. In total, this program has paid out about $4.2 billion, and on average, each person received a little over $571,000. According to the health department, New York has not had a confirmed case of measles since late September.
We shouldn't live like this.
Throughout the year, the city agency responsible for housing some of New York's neediest residents has been the focus of our investigative reports. The New York City Housing Authority has been such a problem, the federal government even assigned an outside monitor to come help fix it up.
This has been like this maybe over 10 years.
There's water coming out through here.
Our reporting has exposed failures by the city to fix broken elevators and leaking pipes, to remove mold and dangerous lead paint. And most recently, we exposed serious security flaws in NYCHA housing due to a lack of exterior lighting.
It's pitch black. Anything can happen.
Dwayne Faison's trek home looks more like a walk through the forest, minus the trees, than it does a stroll through New York City housing.
Can't see much.
You can't see much, right?
He recorded his walk down pathways so dark you can barely make out the people you pass,
You don't know who can jump out at you.
forcing him and his neighbors to use flashlights for their safety.
It's very unsafe.
Residents say they have not had consistently working exterior lights for almost a year.
Where is NYCHA? Where is NYCHA?
Meanwhile, crime in the Cypress houses has climbed. According to data from the NYPD, serious crimes known as index crimes were up nearly 11%, even as index crimes citywide dropped over 3%. Specifically, robberies were up 25% and rapes up 200%.
The message is obvious. NYCHA really don't give a good darn about you.
Trouble keeping up with work orders isn't new for NYCHA. We found the length of time NYCHA took to complete non-emergency repairs has climbed by 32% in the last 3 years. It's a problem so concerning, Mayor Bill de Blasio identified it as a key area for improvement in his 2019 yearly report.
NYCHA does this very, very well. Nothing.
And nothing is exactly what residents say NYCHA did about their lighting for months. We obtained complaints about the lack of working exterior lights going back to December 2018. But when we asked NYCHA about the problem, a spokesperson told us they had only learned about it in the summer of this year. And around the time we started asking questions, they promptly repaired the lights that same week, promising to continue to inspect exterior lighting and address any subsequent issues.
Good night, sweetheart.
Good night, good night, good night, my dear.
And while Dwayne and his neighbors appreciate the repairs,
Ladies, get home safe.
they wonder how long the lights will last.
And we're just tired of it. And we deserve better. As a matter of fact, we demand better.
Following our report, the federal monitor publicly acknowledged our findings and changed the focus of his work with NYCHA. He has since sent out a memo to city housing developments asking residents to detail lighting issues that are impacting security so that he can address them. And now one final topic that has repeatedly been the source of headlines in 2019. Deadly vehicle crashes. After back-to-back years of reductions in the number of people dying in New York City streets, this year that trend has reversed. Again and again, we cover them. The crashes, the deaths, the injuries. Then most of us move on. Most of us, except for the families of the individuals who died. People like Sangeeta Batlani.
They said, we tried our best. We couldn't do anything.
Sorry.
Amanda Hannah McClear.
He was just someone who wasn't jaded at all.
And Shipei Liao.
Because right now, we're not spending that time with our daughter anymore.
For all three families, the details are different. The pain is not.
We're like any other family, but we carry deep scars.
Sangeeta's son died when a driver ran a stop sign and crashed into his father's car.
And then I saw there was blood under his head, and I just knew.
We're playing instruments.
A driver ran over Shipei's daughter while she crossed the street in a crosswalk with her grandmother.
Something about an A-frame. He must have not seen her.
That was the end of July.
And Amanda's loved one died when a speeding car hit another car so fiercely that car went flying into her mother's partner while he sat on his bike.
He was following all the rules of the road.
Traffic deaths continue to be a leading cause of death in the U.S., with urban areas like New York particularly a concern. The federal government estimates since 2009, motorcycle deaths in urban areas nationwide have climbed 33%, bikeless deaths up 48%, and pedestrian deaths up 69%.
Yet we don't hear anybody talk about motor vehicle crashes because they think it's inevitable.
But it's not inevitable, and these families believe changing how we behave on the road will spare other families from feeling their pain.
It's not just one person's lives that's affected, it's a whole community.
You have to just think about the human impact.
New York City's latest transportation report shows more people are biking and walking in the city than ever before. Home deliveries are up, and so are trips in rideshare vehicles. And what that equals is one congested mess. But is any one group more responsible for failing to share the road? We wanted to find out.
Chaos.
It is congestion.
No matter how you travel, commuting in New York City has its dangers.
I'm very fearful of being hit.
It's New York.
And most everyone has someone else to blame.
The bikers are the worst.
Bikers, yes.
I hate them.
The taxi drivers and the Uber drivers.
A lot of cars either don't see us bikers or don't care.
We set up cameras at various New York City intersections over the last several weeks, and each day we found every type of commuter contributing to the problem. Pedestrians crossing streets more occupied with their cell phones.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally on me.
Drivers testing the limits of traffic signals, and cyclists ignoring the rules of the road, speeding through red lights, and even traveling against traffic.
You have to sort of keep your eyes peeled like in every direction now.
So many distractions.
But all those distractions are costing lives. This year, traffic fatalities are up 14% compared to the same time last year. Vehicle deaths up 32%, pedestrian deaths up 11%, and cyclist deaths up 150%.
This is really, really devastating.
This is ridiculous.
No, we all have to be able to live and work together.
Chief Terrence Monahan recently sat down with us.
A lot of the enforcement will go on vehicles, but we can't ignore the bicyclists.
We asked police for information on each of the 25 cyclist fatalities through October, and found police had issued criminal charges to drivers in just about 1 out of every 8 incidents. They wrote tickets in about 1 out of every 4. Also, in 1 out of every 4 incidents, police noted that the biker had disregarded traffic signals.
We have an epidemic of traffic violence in New York City.
Mark O'Connor is a biking advocate.
There's a sense from drivers and pedestrians that cyclists aren't taking their fair share of responsibility.
Cyclists and everyone who is on the street needs to travel safely. But it's important to keep in mind that shouldn't in any way take away from the need to make our streets safe.
And while everyone may have a gripe about the New York City commute, most will admit everyone has some responsibility to bear.
Everybody needs to think of the other side.
A major update to this story, Mayor Bill de Blasio has now signed a new law into effect to increase safety on the road. That law requires the city to add hundreds of additional miles of protected bike lanes, expanded space for pedestrians, and also upgraded signals at intersections. Here at 7 on Your Side, we work for you. If you have a story idea or something you want us to look into, you can contact us at the number or email address on your screen. You can also reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. I'm Danielle Lee. Thanks for watching.